call the meeting to order. Steve, we call the roll, please?
Okay, Councilman Colacott,
Here.
Councilman Rossini,
Here.
Councilman Zimmerman,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Miles,
Here.
Mayor Pitts.
Here.
Absent here and accounted for.
Okay. I'll lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. Please assume your position. Okay, ready, begin. I pledge
Pledge
allegiance to
allegiance to the
the
flag.
United States of America
Of America.
and to the republic for which it stands,
One
one
nation,
nation, under God,
Under God.
indivisible,
indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all.
For all.
Thank you. This time, members of the public may address the council on the items with the subject matter jurisdiction of the council, provided that no action may be taken on off-agenda items unless authorized by law. It's limited to 5 minutes per person, 30 minutes for comments. Steve, do we have any comments?
No, sir.
Okay, let's go to new business. I think we're here today to talk about the draft housing element update. Staff, you want to give a report, please?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you. You recall that we've had some discussions that we have a housing element update that's due to the state HCD by October of 2021, next October, 10 months away, a little over 10 months away. At that time, we need to update the plan and address the RENA discussion. We have John Douglas with us today, but the purpose of the meeting today is not to approve a plan or whatever, but to discuss what we put in the draft, which the draft will be for, the full draft will be for your review for Tuesday night. And Tuesday night, what we'll be asking is that you allow us to submit and direct us to submit the draft to the state to get comments. Not the final draft, but at this point, we just wanted to advise you what's in the draft for Tuesday night, have a discussion on there. And then we can, again, there's no formal action being requested today. You can give us direction, but there's no formal action to approve or direct us to do anything at this point. So I'll turn that over to John. John and Alyssa's going to pull up that one screen so we can go from there. John?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I would also like to mention up front that due to a previous commitment at another city, I am not able to attend your meeting next Tuesday night. And so any questions that you may have about this, if we could try to get them out on the table this afternoon, and I'll do my best to respond. Just by quick background, as Steve indicated, we have to do a housing element update for what's called the 6th planning cycle. That planning cycle extends from 2021 to 2029. And the due date under state law for that housing element update is October 15th of next year for your council to adopt a housing element. So we are ahead of the curve here, and our thought is to try to get this moving and get state HCD's reaction so that we don't get caught up in a time crunch next year. Not sure if you have heard, but several weeks ago, we had a telephone conference call with one of the senior people up at State HCD to bounce some ideas off of him to help guide us in drafting this housing element. And so what we're going to talk about today reflects the input that we've received informally from State HCD. So the key issue with this housing element, as I'm sure you've seen in the press, is the magnitude of the RHNA numbers. And just to refresh your memory, the RHNA, the Regional Housing Needs Assessment, that's the number of housing units that cities have to demonstrate that they could accommodate through their zoning. It's not a mandate to issue building permits, it's a planning exercise. And so for a variety of reasons, these RHNA allocations to cities that are still in draft form, SCAG is working on them, and they expect to finalize these numbers early next year. But the magnitude of these numbers is just staggering. And so many, many cities in Southern California are faced with a situation where they just don't have enough capacity based on their current zoning to accommodate these numbers. And they have to figure out some way to, primarily through amending their zoning in order to accommodate more housing, because that has been directed by the state. So Villa Park, of course, is an unusual city with very little vacant land. And so when we do this analysis of capacity, the big thing that we have to work with is accessory dwelling units. And so what we need to do is convince the state that there is reasonable capacity for future accessory dwelling units that could accommodate these RHNA numbers. And just for order of magnitude, the draft RHNA is almost 300 units for Villa Park for this upcoming planning period. And as I mentioned, that's not final yet because SCAG is not scheduled to adopt those numbers until February or March of next year. But by comparison, the RHNA for the last cycle was only, I think it was less than 20 units, somewhere in the ballpark of 15 housing units for Villa Park. Now we're looking at a need of about 300 units for the next 8 years.
John, I have a question.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I understand that our RHNA number is close to 300. We currently have, I understand, between 50 and 60 ADUs, or what would qualify as an ADU in Villa Park. Do those count towards the 300, or is the 300 in addition to what we've already got?
These RHNA numbers are looking forward. So anything that has been built up to this point is, it's interesting, but it's not relevant for the new RHNA cycle.
Okay, and at what point at what date do they become relevant? Is it after the October 15th of 2021?
Actually, the beginning, leave it to the state to make things as confusing as possible. There are two different time periods. There's the time period when the housing element is due to be adopted. That's October 15th of next year. But then the RHNA period actually begins on June 30th of next year. So anything that is completed after June 30th of next year would count towards our RHNA and would offset that 300 plus or minus requirement.
But anything that's built prior to that time would not.
That's right.
For example, we do have a proposal, a variance that we're going to be hearing on Tuesday, and part of his proposal includes a ADU. If he builds that before that ADU before the, I'm not sure what date is the cutoff date, then we would not get credit for that.
Yeah, June 30th is sort of the magic number, and so what I would advise is that, the final step of the process is a certificate of occupancy, sometimes referred to as finaling a building permit. It's basically the unit's complete and it's ready for occupancy. I think that is the critical date. And so, if the city were to issue a building permit this month and it takes 6 months to build the unit and it's not final and ready for occupancy until July, then I still think that we could count that.
Okay, good. So
Okay.
I guess we need to be thinking strategically about how we do that.
Yes.
John, when does the historical scorecarding take place from the state? They look back, how far up they look back? Do they look back at the date that it starts, or is it previous? Because he referred to, you guys are, averaging about 8 a year type thing, when they look at scorecarding. How far do they go, or does it start start June 30th?
This is one of those things that is very hard to pin down because the state has a very wide latitude on how they analyze this information. What the state has said is that with regard to ADUs, for example, they acknowledge that the production of ADUs has increased substantially in the last year or so because of all the new laws that have taken effect to relax the requirements on ADUs. And so what they have said to cities is, okay, we understand that ADU production has increased a lot. And so we expect that the production of ADUs going forward is going to be much higher than it was in the past 10 years, let's say. So they have suggested that cities look at what their ADU production was up until, say, 2017, 2018, before the new laws really kicked in. And they're prepared to accept without argument that our production is going to go up by a factor of 5 at least. And so I think if my memory serves, and Ray, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this current year, 2020, we have in the ballpark of 10 or 12 ADUs that have come through the process. Does that sound right, Ray?
That's correct.
Okay. Now this is 2020, and so if we go back a couple years to like 2017, 2018, there were very few ADUs approved in Villa Park. There were some guest houses that didn't have complete living facilities, but those don't really count towards ADUs. So what we're going to argue with the state, if we submit the draft housing element as it's written now that you will have before you on Tuesday night, is that we have a track record this past year of about 10 or 12 ADUs per year. And we think because of the new laws and the increased interest, that's going to increase. But then HCD says, okay, but you need to convince us, and you need to offer incentives and relax the standards if you're going to go much higher than that current rate of 10 or 12 ADUs per year. So we only have about 3 different strategies in our toolbox, and that's the slide that you see on the screen. ADUs is the big one in my mind. Let me just very quickly summarize the other 2, and then we can come back to ADUs. You may recall a few years ago, the city had to amend some zoning in the town center for the 2 parcels where City Hall is and the office building next door, to allow residential or mixed use on those properties. And that was required because of the previous housing element and RENA requirements. So that's already been done. And based on that zoning that's already been adopted, there's a potential for roughly 28 residential units on those 2 properties. So we can take credit for that capacity of about 28 units. But, as we said, the number that we have to get to is almost 300. So the town center is a part of the solution, but it's just a minor part of the solution now based on this new RENA. The other strategy that cities can undertake is to upzone other areas from either single family residential or some other land use district to allow multifamily residential. And there are some properties in Villa Park that might possibly be appropriate based on that kind of a strategy, but we're not proposing anything like that at this point. We're focusing on trying to get HCD to give us as much credit as possible for ADUs. And so based on our conversation with HCD staff and some presentations that I've seen them give over the last couple of months, we came up with a list of incentives or relaxed standards that's summarized in the top part of that slide for ADUs. And so the draft housing element that we put together does incorporate these incentives and relaxed standards that you see on the list here. So the big picture, our hope is that with the commitment to adopt these incentives, then HCD will say, okay, we think you have a good plan here, and we're willing to accept your estimate that the production of ADUs is going to increase from 10 or 12, what we've seen in the last year, up to about 30 or so ADUs per year going forward. So that's the stretch that we're trying to get HCD to accept. So let me, before I launch into the
Don, before you go into that, I'd like
Yes.
to run another potential strategy by you.
Yes.
Get your input on that. In Villa Park, we have a number of granny flats, and I would call a granny flat a unit that has a bedroom and a bathroom, but not a kitchen. What if we provided some, and since they're already built, we couldn't take credit for them at, well, and certainly they don't meet the criteria of an ADU, but what if we provided some incentives for people to add a kitchen facility, cooking, and I guess they have to have a sink and a refrigerator and a stove or something to
Yes.
qualify as an ADU. What
Yes.
if we provided some incentive for residents that currently have granny flats to add those to their granny flat so that
Yes.
it could then be an ADU after let's say July 1st of next year?
Yes, that's a very good point. And I think that if someone had a guest house or a pool house, like you say, that doesn't qualify as an ADU because it doesn't have complete kitchen facilities, then I think if someone were to apply for an ADU permit to convert by adding some cooking facilities, I think that would count. So
Okay,
yes,
good.
that could be added to this list of incentives.
Well, that could probably get us some tens of units right there. Another thought is a number of us have, because we have larger homes and so forth, we may have an area that, with a bathroom and a bedroom, separate bathroom and a bedroom. And if we could also provide incentives for people to add cooking facilities and seek a permit for an ADU, even if they don't use it as an ADU, but it would meet the requirements.
Yes.
Could that help us?
Yeah, absolutely. And that would be classified as a junior ADU or JADU. In the law, there's this new thing called junior ADUs
Correct.
that are basically converted into a separate living quarters out of existing floor space in a house.
Yeah, so maybe part of our strategy could be those two items to, help bolster our numbers.
Yes. Yes, excellent points. And we can add those two things to the program commitment in the housing element if it's the pleasure of the council.
John, can I ask a question?
Yes.
I don't know if this is the appropriate time or not. Within the 296 or approximately 300 ADUs that we have to show that we can accommodate, do we have to break it down by income requirements? Like, does 20% have to be available for very low income and maybe 20% for low income, or we just have to show that we can provide the ADUs?
Yeah, that's often a source of confusion. The RHNA is broken down by the different income categories, but there is no mandate that the units, when they're built, that they have to be restricted to the maximum rent or anything like that. The way HCD looks at this issue is that SCAG has done, Southern California Association of Governments did a study over the last few months looking at what the affordability level of ADUs has been. And they did a wide survey over all of Southern California. And they came up with some rules of thumb based on a couple things. Based on, number one, ADUs that have been built and they are rented out, what are the rents that are being charged for those, and where do they fall on that income scale? The other issue, though, is that quite a few ADUs are used for family members or caregivers, and there's no rent charged. And so they qualify as a low income unit because no rent is being paid. So anyway, what the point is that SCAG, with the blessing of HCD, have come up with this sort of a rule of thumb that you can assume that somewhere in the ballpark of 60 to 70% of new ADUs will qualify as low income units based on the surveys that they've done.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
You know, one other, I guess now a third additional strategy for meeting our arena numbers. You know, much of Villa Park is zoned E4, the half-acre larger lot size. Maybe we could look at developing a requirement for approval of building permits for these larger lots. I have one. I think all the council members have E4 lots, but where if you do a beyond a certain threshold size addition to your house, that you need to provide for a junior ADU, which might mean, you know, taking a bedroom and bathroom and adding a, you know, cooking facilities so that it would qualify as a junior ADU. Is that something we could contemplate?
You know, that's an interesting idea, and I'm gonna ask if the city attorney has any thoughts on that, because I'm wondering, you know, if we required, would it be legal to require people to include a JADU or an ADU, for example, when they wanted to do a room addition? I haven't had that question put to me before. Todd, have you heard that come up anywhere?
I have not heard that, but it strikes me that that would be problematic because allowed within any residential zoning is, you know, by definition, a single family residential house. But that isn't, I'd never heard of that as an option before, but that's what my gut says.
You know, one thing that occurs to me is that in some situations you can't legally require somebody to do something, but you can offer an incentive to them if they do.
Good idea.
Yeah, so one of the things we might look, I mean, we've got a couple of incentives on this list already. Maybe we could scratch our heads and see if we could come up with an additional incentive that would be relevant to that expansion kind of a scenario that you described.
Yeah, that would definitely, that would work legally.
Okay, so are there any other questions, or would you like me to walk through these various incentives and just add a bit of explanation?
Yeah, I'd like more, I'd like to discuss them. For example, what fees might we waive? You know, what are you looking at in terms of CUP requirements, et cetera? So if we could go through these.
Yes, okay. Okay, with the first one, the idea is allowing bigger or more, well, the first two bullets, let's take those together. Allowing larger than the state standard, which is 1,200 square feet usually for an ADU, either allowing larger than 1,200 square feet or allowing more than the state required number of ADUs in certain situations. And so the idea that we have put in the preliminary draft housing element to this point is that there are some pretty large lots in Villa Park, and you know, over an acre in size. And so the thought was, if someone has one of those very large lots that's either over an acre or over 40,000 square feet, an acre is about 43,560 square feet. So just a bit more than 40,000 square feet. But if someone had a large lot, then maybe it would make sense to let them build a larger ADU or an additional ADU. So right now, state law says that if you have a single family lot, you can build one ADU plus one junior ADU. So that's 2 extra units on a single family lot. And the idea here is that on those large lots, an acre or more, the city would let them have 2 ADUs plus a JADU. So that's a total of 3 ADUs only on those larger lots. We haven't, on this slide, we mentioned other possible areas such as adjacent to a major street where it might make sense, but we haven't included anything in the draft housing element at this point on lots near arterials. We've only included the additional size or additional ADU for those lots that are more than an acre.
John, on the height, I believe that my recollection is that the state ordinance limits the height of ADUs to 16 feet, correct?
It's, as I understand it, the city has to allow at least 16 feet.
Okay, so under the current ordinance, could somebody build a ADU above their garage? Let's say if they have a single story house, could they build above the garage and exceed the 16 feet?
I want to ask Ray if he has seen anybody come in with an application like that, and if they did, what you think the city's response would be. Ray, have you seen anybody wanting to do an ADU above a garage?
As a matter of fact, I have, John. Actually, a couple of them where the property owner wanted to go above a garage, and there may be one coming before City Council in the new year. And I did check with Todd on this one. In our code, currently it's written that any detached accessory structure or building that exceeds 15 feet in height would require a conditional use permit. I exchanged emails with Todd a few weeks ago now, and he said that a conditional use permit would be required for an ADU above 16 feet. Before there was 2 years ago, if you recall, there was an ADU above, I guess, living space on Loma and Cannon, and that required a conditional use permit. And I believe that's the first one that we have in the city.
So I think, John, in answer to your question, it would require a CUP.
But
Yeah.
that's something we might consider discussing the third bullet. I guess my question is also, what if it's an attached garage and you built above the attached garage and exceeded 16 feet?
Then the conditional use permit wouldn't be required.
Would not, okay.
Would not.
And the maximum height would be, what's our maximum height in Villa Park?
In the residential area, it's 30 feet with a 27-foot average above roof planes above 1 story.
Okay.
Go ahead, John.
Okay, so that kind of summarizes the idea about incentives on larger lots. So if someone had an acre or more, then they would be, if this goes forward and was put into the zoning ordinance, then they would be allowed to build ADUs up to 1,500 square feet rather than 1,200 square feet. And they would be allowed to have 2 ADUs plus a junior ADU on those large lots. Then the next couple of bullet points on this has to do with reducing the cost of building an ADU. And so we thought,
Well, on the third bullet point, that's where we would address the height limitations.
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
Are there
Yes,
any other CUP requirements that might need to be removed or limited?
I'm gonna defer to Ray on this. Ray, have you seen situations where people are put into the CUP requirement for something other than height?
No, that's it.
Or setback sometimes. But with the new ADU rules, you can go, 5 feet.
5 feet, so, yeah.
Isn't it 4 feet?
4 feet, yes.
Oh, 4 feet. Yeah.
Yeah, the original change to state law, I think, was 5, and then they reduced it even further to a 4-foot
4 foot.
setback. Okay, so
And
it
that's
sounds,
just for the rear setback
Mhm.
and the side setback. We
yes,
still can apply the front yard setback for a detached structure or building, which is 50 feet.
now, the draft housing element that we have thus far does not mention that CUP, the relaxing of the CUP issue. That's something that we sort of have in our back pocket. If the state comes back and says, well, this is a good start, but you need to go further. So the draft housing element that we've prepared thus far would not commit to relaxing those CUP requirements, but we certainly, if the council feels that that would be a reasonable thing to do, if HCD pushes us to do more, then that is something that we could add to this list, the list that's in the housing element. Then the financial issues, fee waivers, relaxing the permit fees for ADUs, in our previous discussions, the possibility of tax rebates came up, property tax rebates. I think the idea here is that because these things would reduce the city's revenues, then there would need to be some source of funds to offset that loss. Otherwise, it's city money that is
Well,
pretty scarce.
John, we need to clarify a couple of things then. On the fee waivers, it's revenue we don't have yet.
Yes,
So
that's right.
that's important to note. If we're going to expand and do X number additional units, then we're going to have revenue but beyond our current norm. So if we're going from the 30 units per year, where we're doing 12 now, obviously that additional revenue is revenue we don't have. So to the extent you
Yeah.
could waive some of that, you're not necessarily taking anything we have, you're potentially addressing what we might have. So you're
Okay.
cutting.
But we'd also be increasing our cost because there is a cost to processing and doing the building inspections and so forth.
Well, that's one of the things we're looking at right now with respect to you remember you commissioned and allowed us to commission a fee study. So we're looking at that. But one of the things we're doing is we're programming in current levels of service. So we're not programming in anticipated growth because we don't know exactly what that will be. The other side of it, on tax rebates, you'll recall a lot of our issues, the tax-based property tax is what it is. But when they do a major building construction, the house gets reappraised and there's an assessed valuation increase. So again, that is revenue we don't necessarily have at this point. It's nice to say we'll get it, but these are revenues that we currently don't have, nor are we projecting we'll have. And many of these homes, there's significant increases as a result of adding an ADU, significant property value increases. So that's sort of revenue that's not in our hand at this point. So both of those, I think if we work through them creatively, we would not necessarily hurt ourselves. And I think you're right, Councilman, we can certainly try and anticipate any additional costs we have. But I mean, we don't have to give them a complete waiver, but we can reduce waivers. I mean, that waivers means we lower it maybe or whatever.
Okay.
potential here to do a lot of different things.
So on the tax rebate, we actually realize about 11 cents out of every dollar of property tax that's collected. So we would limit our tax rebate to just that portion that the city may realize.
So yeah, the rebate would affect our portion alone. Yes.
Okay. So not the school district or anybody
No,
else?
no, we wouldn't. I don't think we'd have authority to do anything along those lines.
Okay.
Plus the thought was too, that you'd have an uptake in revenue, so you would cover it with that.
What you have is an uptick in revenue because it's going up, and it's say the 11, the base amount goes up. Maybe you're not going to collect all that base increase that would have gone to the city. So it is it's still a revenue increase, but you don't have to get all of it. So you're reducing your potential.
There's another possibility that might come into play. The state has been providing a lot of grant funds in the last couple of years in order to stimulate housing production. It is possible that in the next few years, there could be additional state grant funds made available to try to stimulate ADU production. And that's something that's prospective. We don't know yet, but if the state were to make grant funds available that could assist with these things like fee waivers and tax rebates and so forth, then
Yeah, John, you have that mentioned down there, the program, our planning grant program.
yes.
The other
Yeah,
thing too
right.
so there's the assistance there, and then the pre-approved building plans, that's also a financial, even though it doesn't look like it. If we could, if somebody saves because they have pre-approved plans, they're not paying architectural fees or things for somebody to draw it. So there's a financial implication there that could be incentivized for somebody, because if they come in, and this is not something that is unique to Villa Park. I mean, ACCOC and a number of other entities, they're talking about doing a model set of building plans that could be transferable for ADUs countywide, basically. I think, Ray, is what we've heard, right? So that would save the cost of construction for somebody. And again, that's not a cost or revenue that we have, but because we would still have the building process, et cetera, the building approved plan process. But at the same time, they would, in their initial investment, might be lesser as an incentive. So both those last two bullets, the pre-approved building plans and the planning grant program, have financial implications, and they're really more financial, both of them. I mean, the planning grant obviously depends upon the availability of grant funds, but candidly, the city could set aside general fund money and say, we're going to develop our own grant program. I think, John, there's nothing precluding the city from doing something along those lines. That's much more of a commitment, and we'd have to think that through, but there's nothing precluding our ability to do that kind of program.
Right.
So I think the last item we were talking about, John, was the promotional efforts and resident interest. I think that goes to a lot of what you're saying, Councilman Colacott, is what are the residents interested in? Maybe they have ideas that they want to do. And if we sort of do a lot more promotional types of things and do questions and get some interest surveys out there and find out there's other ways to promote these and other things that we might include with respect to the building when we get into it. So that's sort of one of the things I think, John, you built in here is into the draft, correct?
Yes.
So that sort of hits our ADUs.
Okay, I've got another question. My understanding is that basements are not currently factored into the square footage of a residence. Ray?
Basements are not counted towards lot coverage.
Towards lot coverage.
Yeah.
They are considered part of.
Yeah, but on a set of plans, it'll reflect what the square footage is overall for living space, but we don't count it towards lot coverage.
Okay, I guess my question, I'm not sure if you or Todd or John are the right person, but to direct the question to, but let's say somebody comes in, they want to do a 1,200 square foot ADU with a full basement. Would the addition of a full basement be allowed, or under the state or our ordinance?
kind
I
of
don't
separate.
see why not.
Pardon?
I don't see why not. I mean, it's probably simpler from the standpoint of not needing to comply with setback requirements, lot coverage, or anything like that. We would still require that it have a recorded restrictive covenant against it, so that it can't be sold separately or turned into a short-term rental or anything like that. So, yeah, definitely a restrictive covenant would still be required for it.
Okay, so if somebody had, let's say they didn't have that big of a big enough lot to accommodate a 1,200 square foot ADU on the surface, we could allow them to put a basement in to reduce their space needs or to expand the space available for the residents.
Yeah, that's a possibility, I would think. Yeah.
Okay.
So John, I think what we want to do is a lot of these are great ideas and stuff, but I think we want to take a first shot across the bow at HCD and see if we can get by with as minimum as we can, so that we don't have to, uptake any of these additional things and take away from us from what we've been trying to accomplish. So are you guys okay with what's been put together? I mean, I know you need to see the actual draft that John needs to put together, but is there anything else you all would like to see or hear?
I think the questions were very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah,
I like what's on here, and I think the concept or the idea of let's shoot this, like say, across their bow and see how they react. And if they shoot it down, well then, there's a lot of really great ideas floating around that we can supplement with and try again. But
yeah, and that was the spirit that I was asking the questions and trying to identify alternatives, is that as we should be thinking now about what what additional things you want to have in our back pocket to offer up if they ask for more.
yeah,
Mhm.
I agree.
Mm-hmm. Councilman Rossini, any thoughts?
Taking you off mute here.
That's
At this
okay.
time, no. I'm candidly my personal preference and what I think is important for the long-term health of Villa Park is to be very cautious, candidly, and maybe I'm in the minority here, on how much we overbuild on these lots. I understand that the state has got us all put into a very, very difficult situation, and that the ADUs may be the bread and butter of this plan, and that help us get us out of this particular requirement of 300 units, the RENA number. But I would just be careful about opening Pandora's box too wide, and then the overall fabric of this community turns in a direction that is very dangerous. I don't want this to be San Francisco in the future. I think that the town center, and I've said this before, is a great place to start, whether you have really emphasizing on mixed use. I noted that the elements are not included in the draft update, but I wanted to ask one question, which was, I know the library office building and council are included in the prior submission. Would that also include the row of restaurants and retail shops directly in front of the council chambers, potentially in a multi-story?
No, at this point, no, Councilman does not include those.
And I don't know, for me personally, I don't have a problem with that. And when you have the high school on one side, those don't directly back up to residences, and you have a parking lot on the other side, and you have a city street that opposes the front side of where that would be when you come in. I don't know why that wouldn't be something to consider as low-hanging fruit. And certainly We've seen development similar to that in a number of places in Orange County already.
The only thing that over and above that you'd have to consider would be parking for all those too.
True. And then that's where you perhaps have to go subterranean, which then you get costs. But, you know, if you market it correctly, if you build it correctly, you can do some good things there. So I don't know. I'm really concerned about putting too much square footage and too many units in these residential communities, overwhelming our infrastructure. But thankfully, this council and our city staff's done a great job of repairing, and you know, just overall taking our home values from going in an upward direction and then potentially going in a downward direction because we've lost the bedroom community that is Villa Park. That's all I have. Thank
Don't
you.
necessarily disagree with you.
I agree with.
We're all concerned about that.
This could really unravel what Villa Park's all about. And it's
Yeah.
really part of our challenge is how do we keep Villa Park like it is in the light of these requirements?
Steve, is there anything else that you want
I
to go?
think at this point, there's nothing formal that we need from the council today. We wanted to walk through and talk through, and I think we've got some very good ideas, and John and I'll talk afterwards about some minor revisions we can make for Tuesday's plan, the draft. But again, I think our goal is let's get up something to Sacramento, let HCD sort of weigh in and where we are. We haven't, obviously, like the Councilman Colacott said, we haven't played everything in our pockets, and, you know, we aren't at this point. I think in to Councilman Rossini's point, we don't want to play everything out there. I think there would be some potential implications community-wide we'd have to discuss on the town center meeting with the current owners, opposition, those kinds of things that might be problematic that we'd have to deal with. So I think we don't want to open up a whole bunch of Pandora's boxes at the same time, I think is my concern. I think you're right, Councilman, but I think that we also got to be careful that we don't open them all at once. So I'd like to sort of, let's see what HCD says to us.
Okay.
That would be my sort of thing. So at this point, unless you have anyone has anything, we've got some indications of where we are, and John and I'll regroup, and we'll get the draft out to you in time to review for Tuesday night's thing. Again, Tuesday night's not a formal approval. Tuesday night would be allowing us to submit it to the state as a draft. With the understanding underscore draft, not a final plan, a draft.
Right. Okay. Is there anything else that you need to cover, anyone, before we close out?
I think we're good. John, we're good?
We're good. Yes. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Good work, buddy.
Thank you.
All
All
right,
right.
thank you all. All right.
Anything else good for the order? Steve?
No, sir.
Todd? Okay. Well, we appreciate you all's time. Thank you so much. Meeting's adjourned. We'll
Have a
see-
good
Have a
weekend,
good one.
everyone. See you on
Thank
Tuesday.
you. Thank you.
On
You as well.
Bye.